Hello, everybody. Welcome to Honey Badger Radio. My name is Brian. I'm here with my wife, Lindsay.
Hello.
And we're going to be looking over and reading through a paper. Karen sent this to me earlier this week, or she shared it with a bunch of us, and I thought it was worth sharing with you guys. So we're going to share this through. I'm going to read through it, and we will determine, what we can glean from it. I just want to ask, though, in advance, a couple things I wanted to point out. Number one, I want to see if the sound is okay on this. Lindsay and I are sharing a microphone, and I know that people have said that sometimes I get cut off. So I think it's because of the noise gate, so I turned the noise gate down. But I don't know if you're getting, any other issues. If everything sounds okay, let me know. And also, I tend to talk really loud compared to Lindsay, so she may have to really lean in there.
Speak up.
Yeah, you may have to speak up. Let me just check. Now, when I monitor it on through OBS, it seems okay. They're saying it sounds good. Sound is fine. Okay. All right, cool. Happy Friday the 13th, everybody. So I thought I would let you all know before we get into the article. It's not really an article, it's a study. It's a paper. On Sunday, I'm leaving for Chicago very early in the morning. And the reason is because my younger brother, is getting married, and he invited me to his wedding. And also because my father is going to be there, and my father has, well, according to my mom, my father's been he's been under care in a, let's say, an old folks home. I don't really know how else to put it. Is that what they call them? Retirement home? Because he's got a lot of health problems. And when COVID happened, I wasn't able to see my father for the entire year. And even then, I wasn't seeing him that much beforehand because you had to make appointments and all of that. But when COVID happened, I wasn't able to see him at all. So my understanding is he's also going to be at this wedding, and I want to see my father. I mean, he doesn't have a whole lot of time left. And so I'd like to spend some time with my dad while I can. So anyway, I won't be doing, long story short, I won't be around next week. So HBR is going to be still doing shows to my knowledge, but not with my involvement, not for 1 week. But it doesn't mean anything, outside of that. People are saying they can hear the air conditioner.
That was what it was.
Okay.
That was picking up.
It's the AC. It's really hot here, so I don't know that there's much I can do about that. I apologize. I have some adjusting to do. But anyway, so that's the story of that. So today is the last show. I mean, I think I'm doing a fundraiser tomorrow, but other than that, today's the last show for a week. I'll be back next Tuesday, not the coming Tuesday, but the following Tuesday with the usual scheduled programming. All right. So let's get into this article. This is a paper, and I put a link to it in the description so you can look at it yourself. It's an original paper on the sexual assault of men by David DeMarco, John Mazzoni, and Ryan Savitz. And it's actually interesting but not surprising to me, because we've kind of talked a little bit about this on the show before, but having this information could be useful. And again, I highly recommend you guys look at it yourself, share it around, because this sort of stuff matters. It's only 9 pages, so not a terribly lengthy study, but it does cover the essentials. So, all right, I'm going to read the abstract. Darth Sonic 413 gives us $2 and says, "Why does Twitch say this is yesterday's HBR talk?" I don't know. Why? Oh, I see. Twitch is kind of glitching out right now with it's not interacting with Restream.io very well, so it's just keeping the last thing. Maybe I can edit the settings. Give me a second here, and I'll change the title so you guys are up to date on that. So yeah, it's just an issue between Twitch and Restream. So I've just changed the title. Invalid response from Twitch. Okay. I'm going to try to connect the account then. Authorize. If it doesn't, don't worry about it. If it still shows the wrong title, there might not be much I can do about it. So, all right. Anyway, thank you, Darsonic, for letting me know. All right. Abstract. Anyone who engages in sexual intercourse with someone who is under the influence of drugs or alcohol, unconscious, oblivious to their surroundings, or not able to voice dissent can be charged with the crime of rape. No individual should be used without their consent for another person's pleasure. The lack of informed consent makes rape unethical. And it also makes it rape. I mean, that's why it's rape. Ethically, the victim being male should be irrelevant. Yet, male rape is rarely reported and frequently minimized, as will be shown by the 2010 CDC National Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey, as well as other sources in this paper, which will show that male rape happens about as often as female rape, and possibly exceeds it. So this is the claim that they're making, or this is their thesis, is that males who are victims of rape happen about as often as females who are victims of rape. We're not talking about perpetrators, we're talking about victims. Evidence shows also that 80% of those who rape men are women. Reconsidering stereotypes of the rape of men is an important part of rethinking masculinity. Among these stereotypes is the assumption that male rape is rare, as well as assumptions about the experience of male rape victims. The goal of this paper is to show that male rape is a prevalent problem and that the victims endure the same emotional and psychological after effects as female rape victims. All right? So that's I don't know if, I don't think that's a big claim, but that's what they're saying. So essentially it happens to men about as often as it does to women, and that the majority of the time women are the ones engaging in it. Now they do start by saying, this is about people who are under the influence, which I would imagine
not always.
Not always, but it does say like they're using the under the influence of drugs or alcohol and being oblivious to your surroundings or unconscious is the thing that, they're saying that if you had sex with someone like that, that would be considered rape. So my guess is what they're going to do is they're basically going to say that women may rape at these higher rates, but it's because they are drugging men, as opposed to men who maybe they just, overpower women. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That would be my guess. What were you going to say?
Part that was a bit fishy to me is reconsidering stereotypes of the rape of men is an important part of rethinking masculinity.
Yeah.
Is that your
that jumped out at me a little bit, but it could. Okay. I think that the results will speak for themselves when we look at the study, but whenever I see rethinking masculinity, it does turn my hairs up. But
how do you rethink out of a fucking
I don't know. I think that there's a lot, because I'm going to be charitable to the people who wrote this paper, and I'm going to assume that they're the kind of MRA friendly types that believe that they believe in equality in this abstract way, and maybe when they say rethinking masculinity, it has more to do with the way that we think of men and their lack of a desire to speak up when they're victimized.
Right.
It could be that.
And by the feminist definition of rape, men probably are raped more.
By the feminist definition of rape, everyone's been raped multiple times. But I don't think that's what this is.
Well, sure, but I mean, when you bring in the idea that if somebody's under the influence, that's it. It's what if they're both under the influence? Mm-hmm. Who's the rapist?
Well,
you know what I mean?
The man. That's literally the Brock Turner story, right?
Yeah.
Because if both Brock Turner and the girl, whose name I don't remember, but she wrote a book and shit, if both of the people had the same amount of alcohol and or drugs in their system, Brock Turner, the man, is more likely to, I think, have his wits about him, maybe slightly, Aren't men have a higher tolerance for alcohol? That's what I'm getting at.
Well, I don't buy that though.
All right.
Because like I mean, it depends on how like their body weight and like their sex does
I'm talking
factor
about,
in.
Yeah, there's factors, but I'm saying in general. I'm just speaking in general.
Yeah.
Anyway, let us continue because this is important. Okay, introduction. According to Thornhill and Palmer, 2000, rape is defined as. So they're using this definition of rape. Copulation resisted to the best of the victim's ability unless such resistance would probably result in death or serious injury to the victim or in death or injury to individuals the victim commonly protects. Other sexual assaults, including oral and anal penetration of a man or a woman under the same conditions, also may be called rape under some circumstances.
So that isn't the feminist definition of rape.
No, but this is a pretty fair and broad definition because they're not. The thing is, the feminist definition of rape is gendered.
Yeah.
Right? So it basically is only when women are victims is it a rape. If men are victims, it's not. Unless there's some political like cachet to get from it. Say if it's a male rape victim, but also a male rapist, for example. So, all right. A person who has sex with someone who is drugged, intoxicated, passed out, incapable of saying no, or unaware of what is happening can be charged with the crime of rape. In ethical terms, we have duties to respect the dignity of other persons. Persons have the moral right not to be used as a means to someone else's sexual pleasure. Acts of rape are unethical due to the lack of voluntary and informed consent. Should it matter that the victim of rape is a man? Ethically, it should not. Yet, the crime of men being raped is drastically underreported and commonly minimized, as demonstrated by data from the 2010 Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, which is the CDC, National Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey, and other sources that suggest that the number of male rape victims is comparable to the number of female rape victims, and perhaps exceeds it. Additionally, the data indicate that 80% of the rapists of men are women. Part of the larger project of rethinking masculinity involves facing stereotypes about the rape of men. So this could be, just to reiterate, they could be using the language of feminists, rethinking masculinity, stereotypes, blah, 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 as a weapon against them to sort of like hold them to their own standards,
Sure.
It's possible, although feminists don't have standards.
Probably likely.
Yeah. One such stereotype is that male rape is rare, while another is about the experience of male rape victims. The aim of this paper is threefold. Number one, we will take an overview of the existing data and show that the sexual assault of men is a common problem. Number two, we will present evidence that male rape victims suffer the same emotional and psychological consequences as female rape victims. Number three, we will discuss the ethical importance of treating all crimes of sexual violence as equally serious, regardless of the gender of the victim and perpetrator. We pause to note that this is a U.S.-focused paper, and the source of the material is North American, United States. So, in this paper, the common assumption that men are seldom the victims of rape will be investigated and demonstrated to be false. Currently, little in the way of resources is dedicated to male victims of rape. Related to this, we will consider the incidence of both male-on-male rape and female-on-male rape. It will be shown that the crime of men being raped is drastically underreported. Stereotypes of the rape of men will be examined, and the minimization of the crime of raping a male will be discussed. We want to stress again, as we mentioned elsewhere in this paper, that crimes of sexual violence against women are widespread, the cause of great physical and emotional pain, and completely inexcusable under all circumstances. The goal of this paper is not in any way to diminish these sad facts. I know, this is so dumb. Rather, our goal is to take a look at an under-discussed topic, namely the rape of men.
Yeah, okay, you're excused.
Yeah.
I guess you can do that.
I'm sorry, it's just me, but I'm really tired of having to make all these disclaimers. I think rape is bad too, especially against women. I just want to use this to talk about men. No, nobody has to say that. Who the hell is pro-rape? Rapists, really. And even they might be like not pro-rape of everyone. They might have like people they want to protect. I don't know. But just, you don't have to say this. I want people to stop pre-apologizing for views that they don't actually hold, in the event that people who might read their paper or watch their video or talk to them or something might just decide to assume that they are for bad things. Most people are not for bad things. Like, just say, I'm against bad things. And because I'm against bad things, I'm against rape of men. Unless you don't think the rape of men is a bad thing. So, anyway, data and history of the crime of rape. We first turn our attention to the CDC National Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey summary report. This was done in 2010. So remember, in 2010, in the United States, the rape of a man was not considered rape, even if you anally, like, sodomized them against their consent. That's not that, because the letter of the law for rape by the FBI was defined as something that was done. Yeah, the FBI.
The FBI was
the feds
signing?
When they defined rape, and I think this was probably the case in most states, and maybe it still is, I don't know. But when they defined rape, it was gendered. They basically said this is something that a man does to a woman. And anything else, like other kinds of penetration, let's say you put, you're a woman, let's say you're a woman and you're raping another woman, but you don't rape her because you don't have a penis, so you can't. So instead, you basically like shove something in her. Like, that would be considered sexual assault by the FBI standards, not rape. And sexual assault is supposed to be like a less severe crime, right? So it is treated differently. Now, they changed that in 2013, the letter of the law, to be more gender neutral, but it's still like the rape of a rape of a man is still only if he's penetrated. So if a woman forces herself on him, that's just sexual assault by the current definition.
Right.
It's still not rape. Okay. So they made it gender neutral, but they only specify penetration. So, okay, anyway. So this report states the following regarding rape on page 17. So this is the CDC definition. Rape is defined as any completed or attempted unwanted vaginal, for women, oral or anal penetration through the use of physical force, such as being pinned or held down, or by the use of violence or threats to physically harm, and includes times when the victim was drunk, high, drugged, or passed out and unable to consent. So they are talking about oral, anal, or uniquely in the case of women, vaginal. Right? So if a woman forces herself on a man, none of that's not rape. Okay? Rape is separated into three types: completed forced penetration, attempted forced penetration, and completed alcohol or drug facilitated penetration. Among women, rape includes vaginal, oral, or anal penetration by a male using his penis. It also includes vaginal or anal penetration by a male or female using their fingers or an object. Among men, rape includes oral or anal penetration by a male using his penis. It also includes anal penetration by a male or female using their fingers or an object. Okay? We pause to note that in this paper, we will use this definition of rape only when discussing the CDC report. Otherwise, we use the definition of rape given in the introduction of the paper, which I read earlier. Of note here is that this report does not consider a woman forcing intercourse on a man to be rape. Okay? Consequently, the report defines a new category of crime to include a woman forcing intercourse on a man as a new category called being made to penetrate. Being made to penetrate includes any time the victim was, against their will, forced to sexually penetrate someone else. One might think having a different definition for a woman forcing sex on a man is not necessarily harmful, provided made to penetrate is given the same attention and analysis as rape. However, Stempel and Meyer 2014 discuss in detail how the CDC report excluding female forced intercourse from rape trivialized the sexual victimization of men. Stempel and Meyer state that much more information was given on rape than made to penetrate, and that rape had its own table in the CDC report, while made to penetrate was treated as a subcategory included in the category of other sexual violence, together with lesser harm categories like non-contact unwanted sexual experiences. Stempel and Meyer also said the CDC's own press release about the survey, for example, uses the word rape 7 times, including the word raped past tense, and makes no mention of made to penetrate. In this way, rape is the harm that ultimately captures media attention, funding, and programmatic intervention, whereas made to penetrate is relegated to a secondary, somewhat obscure harm. All right? So you can see that they're treating a woman forcing herself on a man as a less severe crime than rape, even though it's literally the same act, except the aggressor is different, right? It should be noted that the CDC report's definition of rape is the definition of rape currently used by the FBI. In 2012, the FBI updated the definition. Okay, so I thought it was in 2013, but it was in 2012. They updated the definition of rape in their Uniform Crime Report Summary Reporting System to read, and this is the FBI's definition right now, the penetration, no matter how slight, of the vagina or anus with any body part or object, or oral penetration by a sex organ of another person without the consent of the victim. So that's literally just worded so that only men could rape, and only women, no, that only men can rape, not necessarily that only women can be victims of rape, because by the FBI's definition, a man can rape another man. A woman could rape another man if she
with penetration.
Yeah, but she'd have to penetrate him, right? So if she pegged him or something. But a woman could not. She would not be a rapist by the definition of the FBI if she forced herself on him. Like
if she got a man drunk and forced him to have sex with her, that wouldn't count.
That would not count. It would be like a secondary obscure harm. It would be sexual assault, maybe at best. Mm-hmm. So, and bear in mind, like, I don't know if they're going to go into this, but my suspicion is that when women rape men, when they force men to penetrate them, it's usually, and that's what I would believe, because I don't think that women typically force themselves on men. Although I have done some stories of women who have used a knife to threaten men to have sex with them. But it usually involves drugging men or getting them really drunk. But and they also, or they essentially they prey on people who they can overpower, either through drugs or by their age difference. So think about like teachers, having sex with their students. Now they usually just need to, seduce them, but not always. We've seen stories of, because a lot, this is another thing that's really funny, is that when they do these stories of teachers seducing students, they always, most of the time the stories are really attractive teachers. And that's where that whole, I wish she was my teacher, meme comes from.
And they make it sound like they're in a relationship.
Yeah. And then the teacher or teacher's aide, who's usually, significantly older than the student, goes into this whole, he made me feel so special, and, I have a history of sexual, of sexual abuse or sexual assault, and from my past, and that's why I'm acting this way. And all of a sudden, we have all this, sympathy for this female rapist, basically. And that never goes the other way, obviously. But
yeah.
Never, ever, ever goes the other way.
I can't even imagine.
No, I couldn't imagine a male teacher saying, well, but we got along so well, and she made me feel so young and lively. It just wouldn't work. But it does for women.
This is not safe for you two.
But there are stories.
How many times have we said sex and penetration?
And rape?
Rape, yeah.
I think I've said rape more than, and I'm not done yet. But the other thing I was going to say is that oh crap, I'm forgetting. It's going away. It's disappearing.
Male teachers?
Male teachers. No, that's not what I was going to say.
That's what we were talking about.
Well, anyway, it might come back to me later.
I'm sorry.
No, it's not your fault. It's fine. I was just saying that. Oh yeah, no, I remember now. There are stories of, and again, it shouldn't matter if the teacher's attractive or not, because you don't know like how the student feels. Like I know when I was in high school, I was guarding my virginity like a fucking crusader. Like I did not want to lose my virginity to like slutty girls, and there were a lot of slutty girls in my high school that wanted essentially just to take my virginity, and they weren't ugly, but I just wasn't into them. So it doesn't really matter if the teacher is attractive or not. But if you need to know, there are some stories that I've done of really, really unattractive, old and overweight women who are teachers that have also preyed on their students. So it shouldn't matter, but just putting it out there, you know, there are plenty of stories of bulldog teachers, bulldog women that prey on students. And I remember some of them, like, you know, again, it shouldn't matter, but just putting it out there. All right. Anyway, Meredith G gives us $5 and says, tip for the internet bill. Thank you, Meredith. All right. So I'm going to go back to this. So we have our definition of rape. Notice it excludes men who are forced to penetrate women. All right. Now, you guys know that because we've talked about it on the show. But it is, you know, you can confirm this with the CDC's definition as well as the FBI's definition. And if you're not from the United States, tell me, like, if your definition from the country or the government that you know, that rules over you, do they use a really gender neutral?
Serves you.
Yeah, serves you. Sure. Let me know. Like, maybe the laws are different in your country or they're worse. I don't know. So anyway. This earlier definition, the penetration, yeah, I already read that. Whereas from 1927 until 2012, the definition of rape was the carnal knowledge of a female forcibly and against her will. So from 1927 till 2012, probably since there was an FBI. I think they were new in the 20s, but this earlier definition completely excluded the possibility of a male being a rape victim. Assuming that moral principles should be gender neutral, it is striking to note that the FBI utilized a definition of rape that only applied to one gender until 2012. The newly revised FBI definition of rape is still not gender neutral, as the definition does not include the possibility of female forcing intercourse on a male. Note that the definition of rape given at the beginning of this paper is gender neutral. This ethical neutrality is the reason why we use this as the default definition of rape throughout the paper. However, since the FBI does not make law, what were you going to say?
I just wanted to ask a question. I don't know if you know this, but if it doesn't count as rape, what if it is like an older woman and
a young woman?
No, a young boy.
Oh yeah.
Like, is it still? Like, if it's not considered rape, is it still like molestation?
I think it does count as rape, but only because actually you might be right. It may not. I was gonna say if it does, it's more like what do you call it? Statutory rape because the boy is underage, but not necessarily because she forced him to penetrate her. But then again, if it isn't rape anyway, because like, let's say they didn't have sex and they were just dating or something, or she like French kissed him or something.
Right.
Is that considered statutory rape? It might. But the reason why I bring it up is because
it's something.
It's
gotta be something.
It is something, but I think the conditions to meet statutory rape have more to do with the age difference than the gender. So forced sex of a male or female is considered rape in the Ukraine. Well, that's good. Based Ukraine, I guess. They understand that men and women need to be protected. Okay. So, however, since the FBI does not make law, federal laws are only made by the president and Congress, of course. This is not a federal legal definition of rape. In fact, the United States does not have a federal legal definition of rape, leaving it up to each state to have their own definition of rape. Because of the complicated history of the definition of rape, some states have struck the word from their statutes, preferring to use some variation of sexual assault.
I think I knew this.
So there are some states that don't even use the word rape because it's so messy, and it gets messy. I'm okay with that. I'm okay, like, if they don't use rape, because it's not just a messy word unless you're just willing to use it, you know, like universally, which I don't have a problem with. But maybe it's also a bit politically charged. And maybe sexual assault is a lot more like it's the same shit. It doesn't really matter what we call it as long as the punishments, you know, match the crime. So we note that in the CDC Sexual Violence Surveillance Uniform Definitions and Recommended Data Elements version 2.0, Jesus, what a title, a gender-neutral definition of the term sexual violence was introduced on page 11. While sexual violence as defined in that report is too broad a term to use in place of rape, it is noteworthy that the CDC seems to be moving towards gender-neutral definitions. Next, we consider the data for the 12 months preceding the CDC report survey, which was summarized in the report. On page 18 of the CDC report, it states that 1,270,000 women were raped during this 12-month period, and that too few men were raped during the same 12 months to give reliable data, using the non-gender neutral definition of given in the CDC report. However, on page 19 of the report, it states that during the 12 months, the number of men who were forced to penetrate someone is 1,267,000. So that's close to the women's statistics, right? And of course, bear this in mind too, 1,270,000 women and 1,267,000 men sounds like a lot, but when you consider that the United States has 300 million people, it's a tiny percentage. It's actually like significantly less than 1%. No, 300, yeah.
I can't.
It's less than 1%. Or it's about, yeah, because 300 million, 1 million, like it's like one, you know,
take away all the other million.
Yeah,
it's like 301.
So it's still a really low number. I mean, obviously 1,270,000 and 267,000 is too many, but when you look at it in the wider context of how many people there are, and if you compare it to other crimes like violent crimes like assault, murder, attempted murder, battery, it probably falls in line with those. And the reason why I bring it up is because feminists are always trying to like make rape into like this epidemic, you know, that's everywhere, so, and 1 in 5 women,
I have a
1 in 4.
Question. Is this based on a survey, or is it based on like a record, like police reports or something?
It's a CDC report survey.
Oh, so it's a survey.
Yeah. And it also includes the men who were forced to penetrate, which is very close, virtually the same as the number of women who were raped. Further, and I think that's actually a really interesting statistic, that many men have been forced to penetrate, which actually makes me more likely to believe both of these numbers, although I would like to know what definition of rape the CDC is going with, because it's possible that if they are using a broadened or politicized definition of rape for women, that these numbers might be too high. But we'll see. Because if you can convince a person that they're the victim of something by like just, you know, you can manipulate someone into thinking that they're a victim of something they may not be. That's what the Mary Koss study is. So. Well,
yeah, that's what I was wondering about, because if it's just like, if it's a survey, then that may mean that the person that was victimized never went to the police or anything.
Yeah.
So they might
that
not
would explain why the numbers for men are so high. Because if those men went to the police, then that data, it may even still get lost because of the fact that they're not defining rape the same way. They're calling that forced to penetrate, right? That's why that's what they're saying is that...
Right, like it might not even...
Yeah. So
Yeah.
like the CDC is reporting that so few men were raped in that time period that they just didn't like include them. But
Right.
then the next page they mention men who have been forced to penetrate.
Right.
So it's basically about the same. Further, we note that the number of raped women includes those who were forcibly sodomized, while the number of men forced to penetrate does not. So it doesn't even include men who have been sodomized. It only includes men who are forced to penetrate women. So if a woman sodomized a man, or a man sodomized a man, that wouldn't have been counted. Although I think, and that's another thing that's...
Wait. But that would be rape, right?
It would be, yeah.
Then, like, why would the number of men raped is, like, 0?
Because the CDC said, and that's the thing, the CDC says too few men were raped during the same 12 months to give reliable data.
That can't be true, though.
No, it can't be. No.
I mean, I'm not talking about forced to penetrate. I'm just talking about, like, their definition of rape.
Yeah, a man being sodomized by another man.
Right.
Or a woman, I guess, if she's using an object.
Right.
But no, they basically just left the men out of the rape, of the rape by the CDC's definition of rape.
But even by their definition, it can't be.
No.
Be 0.
No, it's not. It's totally not 0. But the CDC is saying the number is too low. It's not even worth. Like, we can't even reliably determine that this number is right because it's so small. So we're going to ignore it and only focus on the women. But remember too, I think the CDC is kind of a political organism. It's not completely neutral.
A little bit, Brian.
No, I mean, I know. I'm just saying. Remember, the CDC is a bit of a political organization, so it does behoove them to sort of like minimize male victims of rape while mentioning forced to penetrate on the very next page of their report as though it doesn't count. But, and I think the reason for this is kind of, I would say it's obvious, but these reports, these CDC things, they're politically useful to activists, academics, intellectuals, journalists, etc., that want to push a narrative about women being the victims of rape. So they'll happily mention the 1,270,000 women who were raped in a 12-month period. And because the CDC literally tells them, yeah, there was too few male victims of rape for us to even bother mentioning, then they just say, okay, and they'll just cherry pick that statistic, and then they'll use it. And they'll leave out the very next page that shows that, almost just as many men were forced to penetrate. So, interesting statistic in my opinion. And yeah, I mean, we could get like into like how many of those are real, I don't know. But
I think that the CDC is underreporting by their own definition the rape of men, maybe
Absolutely.
by other men in prisons.
Or by women who are using objects on them.
Sure.
But yeah,
it's definitely not 0.
Yeah, but you know what? That's another thing too, though. Like, people bring up the prison statistics, and I know the prison statistics matter, but when you think about it, the percentage of men in prison is actually like pretty low compared to the typical man, right? So the prison statistics, in my opinion,
Where's my phone?
while they matter, I think that they're less crucial than the being forced to penetrate statistics that are in this report, because maybe the prison statistics they can be a bit of a distraction. Because if you think about it, like if you bring up like, oh yeah, men get raped in prison, well, first of all, people are less likely to give a shit about men in prison and what they're dealing with. And that is a problem. I don't think that should be a thing. Because
would we be okay if women just got raped in prison?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, well, that is a growing concern because now trans women want to be in the prisons with the women, and all of a sudden everybody gives a shit. But what I'm saying is that there is an assumption about men in prison, and the assumption is, and it's something that I brought up for years. Okay, number one, that if they're in prison, then they probably committed a violent crime, therefore there's just less sympathy for them. But I think that most men in prison probably didn't commit a violent crime, and they're probably in there for other things that, like, for example, tax evasion or What's the big one that guys get nailed on? Oh yeah, drugs. Being caught like with a dime bag or something, right? And some places are really severe. And sure, there are some that are in there for assault and murder and rape and other violent crimes, are in gangs, what have you. But I think that it's probably likely that the majority of those guys, they're not in there for violent crime. But we have this mind block that if a guy is in prison, he must deserve it. He must be in there for a reason. And whatever happens to him in prison is a part of the sentence. And this is why people always joke about prison rape when it comes to men. But they never do it when it comes to women. Because the assumption is that if a man goes to prison, he deserves whatever happens to him. And the fact is, prison is the punishment, but not necessarily the violent culture that lives in the prisons. I don't think that that's intended or it should be considered as part of the punishment. So when Joe Rogan makes the joke about, guys get raped too, have you considered prison rape? And then Joe goes, yeah, they get raped by other men, you dumbass. He thinks that what he's done is basically said, well, because rape is happening to men, but the people raping them are other men and it's happening in prison, it's something that we shouldn't give a shit about because those guys are in prison, they deserve it. And it's only
men and men problem.
Yeah, it's a man problem. Exactly.
Why are you doing this to each other?
But the thing is, I think that statistically prison rape is a big problem with men in prison, but when you look at the bigger numbers and you take into consideration these CDC statistics about being made to penetrate, maybe instead of focusing on the prison rape, which we can bring up if we need to, we should focus on the being forced to penetrate rate.
Yeah, sorry.
That's what I was getting at.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right.
Back to the paper.
Let's go back to the paper. All right. So further, we note that the number of raped women includes those who were forcibly sodomized, while the number of men does not. Okay, that was something I mentioned already. Even with that, 1,270,000 is only 0.24% larger than 1,267,000. And given that the population of the United States in 2010 was only 49% male, the per capita rate of rape was actually 4.37% higher for males than it was for females, even if we completely ignore small number reported by the CDC. So that's if you ignore the number that the CDC didn't feel was important and so left it out, right? Perhaps if a more gender-neutral view of rape were more widespread in our society, then these statistics would not seem so surprising. As things are right now, though, if one does not take the time to look closely at these kinds of statistics, then one would never realize that the incidence of male rape is comparable to the incidence of female rape. All right, so I got a super chat. Josh Chasen gives us $2, and thank you, Josh. And he says, half the people are in prison because of the war on drugs. Yes, and that is men mostly. And I agree. I'm obviously against the war on drugs. But yeah, I agree. And so like if you get a guy, again, because he was carrying drugs, he had drugs on him, or even if he was selling, and he goes to prison and he gets raped. And it's funny because people like Joe Rogan and like the first guys who are like, I'm against the war on drugs. Like I don't think that there should be a war on drugs. But they'll also joke about guys who were arrested because of the war on drugs and then raped in prison and basically say your problems don't matter because, you had a male dick inside of you and not a female one. So, anyways.
A female dick? Yeah,
a sheenus. You ever heard of those? Blair White has a sheenus. From what I've heard. She tells me it's glorious, but I haven't seen it. So who is forcing these men to penetrate them? There is no data on this among the 12-month data, but if we look at the lifetime data, on page 24, it says that 79.2% of the time a male who was made to penetrate someone, it was a woman who forced him to penetrate her. That makes sense. And this suggests that the same most likely holds for the 12-month data. Actually, what's even more interesting about that is the about 30% of men who were forcing another man to penetrate them. Is that like what a power bottom is? Is that what you call that? Like a gay man forcing another gay man, or maybe not a gay man, to penetrate his ass. Like, is that? Because that's what this is. Like, they're saying most of the time, like close to 80% of the time, it's a woman, but that means that 20% of the time it's another man. So how are they doing that?
Yeah.
I'm just curious. You know, it's like, I'm gonna assume the position, and you better bang me.
Yeah, because like, it seems harder because you'd have to like be facing
unless you have like a gun or something, or you drug them, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's one for the ages, and not a question I actually want answered, so don't bother answering it. Additional evidence of how frequently women rape men. We note that since we are no longer referring to the CDC report, we are no longer using their definition of rape. Rather, here we're using the definition of rape given in the introduction of this paper, which is gender neutral. So additional evidence of how frequently women rape men is found in Cry et al. 2003, who state that in a sample of 248 women, almost 1 in 10 respondents have reported having used aggressive strategies to coerce a man into sexual activities. 10%. And I wonder why they felt like they could just admit that. And another 5.4% attempted acts of sexual aggression. This study is of special interest as it specifies how these women coerced men into sex. The study states, quote, exploitation of the man's incapacitated state was used most frequently, 5.6%, followed by verbal pressure, 3.2%, and physical force, 2%. That goes in line with what I was saying. We were talking about this at the dog park before we did the show. And I was basically saying that I think that when women do it, drugging men is probably the most common way.
Yeah.
Because, like, they can't overpower them otherwise. I mean, there are instances where they can, but most of the time, women aren't really going to be able to use physical force or physical violence to force themselves onto a man. And so instead, they tend to drug men. And you can, like, that sort of lines up with incidents where women have used violence on men, but they drugged them first. Remember the woman who, she was, I don't remember her name, but she was angry at her husband because he said he was going to divorce her, and so she drugged him, and then when he fell asleep, she cut off his penis and threw it in the garbage disposal. That was from years ago. Yeah. And then, like, the women of The View or The Talk or something, like Sharon Osbourne, they were all joking about it, and, you know.
Yeah, that was a long time
She
ago
drugged him to do that, and there was a story we did not that long ago of the woman who, this guy woke up and this woman, his girlfriend was straddling him, and she had like a knife and she cut him.
Oh yeah. The British guy.
Yeah, the British guy. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think he was drugged too or something.
Well, not really.
Or drunk?
I don't think he was. I think she was drunk. I think that she had a drinking problem, and
yeah, I think she might have been bigger than him too.
Yeah, she was.
She was bigger than him. That's what it was. So she was using force. Yeah.
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 And she told him to clean up the house or something like that, and he went to bed, and that was it. She was after his ass.
Yeah.
And then he went to bed with like all these wounds, woke up, and she's like, I'll fry you up some breakfast. And then she comes in with a fucking hot frying pan and starts beating him.
Yeah. That was just dysfunctional couple for sure. I mean, she was messed up. I don't know why he was like, I guess I'll go to sleep now. Like, I don't know why he did that.
Yeah.
All right, well, she tried to kill me with a knife, but I'm tired.
Well, I think he had wounds. He might have
he was
in
bleeding.
Shock.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe.
But I don't know if she raped him. I mean, she definitely assaulted him.
Yeah, for sure.
Maybe like even almost killed him.
Yeah, I was just using it as I guess a way to explain how it's possible that a woman could in fact overpower a man if she was like bigger than him or whatever. But most of the time it's not going to be that. So, I mean, you'd have to be some fucking, like, I don't know, some female power lifter and your husband's like
Amazonian.
Yeah, like some Amazon.
Sharkosaurus.
Yeah. Death by snoo. I'm not making light of this. I'm just trying to like make it enjoyable while I read through this dark study. And from Stempel and Meyer 2014, we have more evidence of how frequently women rape men. This report, significant for its vast data source, used 12-month data on sexual victimization from 5 independent federal surveys conducted between 2010 and 2012 by the Bureau of Justice Statistics, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Okay? Using this data, Stempel et al. Considered the assumption that men seldom experience sexual victimization and found this assumption to be completely false. It was discovered that in many situations, men experience sexual victimization at rates similar to those experienced by women. Ybarra and Mitchell 2013 examined sexual violence committed by adolescents. The significance of their result, and this is, I think this is going to be interesting. The significance of their result is the interesting result that prior to the age of 18, most perpetrators are male, but once youths reach 18 years of age, males and females are relatively equally represented as perpetrators, giving more evidence of female victimization of males. That's funny though. I thought it was going to like include boys under 18 with adult women. I don't know if we don't count that as rape though. We don't count that as rape when adult women prey on males. And it's not just happening, it doesn't just happen with teachers and sort of like female authority figures. And this is going to sound really disgusting, but it happens in families and friends of families as well. You can like find a lot of, and I wish I could give you guys a link that you could go to, but you can find stories of like there was like a documentary about hip hop rap artists, so black men that were in the hip hop scene that had stories of female family members, like much older cousins, aunts, that had raped them when they were young, like say 12 or 13 years old. And it is another thing that no one wants to talk about, especially because it kind of like stigmatizes the world of hip hop, but it has nothing to do with hip hop, obviously. But it just so happens, you know, that's a problem. And I think that in my opinion, relates to the fact that there's no fathers around. And I think that's how you get like these predatory family members. They could also be step parents as well. Yeah. What were you gonna say?
Well, I think in the case of that too, like the kid might be less likely to go to authority to report it, right?
Yeah, for sure.
If it's a family member or something.
Yeah, right. They're scared of that.
Or a friend of the family.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's messed up.
And also take into consideration that when anyone is committing an act of sexual assault or rape, doesn't matter if they're male or female, that is most of the time those people were themselves the victims of sexual assault or rape. Mm-hmm. So like when the study says, oh yeah, it looks like, you know, results interesting is the result of the prior to the age of 18 most perpetrators are male. Well, it makes me wonder how many of those young male perpetrators were themselves victims of rape as well, because I bet that there is at least a correlation. So Anderson 1998 took 2 samples of college women, one sample of 212 from 3 colleges in New York City area, and another sample of 249 from a college in Louisiana. This study suggests victimization might vary regionally. Anderson examined their self-reported heterosexual aggression. In the New York sample, 28.5% of the women reported using sexual coercion, 21% engaged in sexual abuse, and 7.1% engaged in physically forced sex. In the Louisiana sample, 25.7% engaged in sexual coercion, 7.3% engaged in sexual abuse, and 1.6% engaged in physically forced sex. And last...
is this, again, based on a survey? Is this people admitting that they engaged in forced sex?
Yep. These are women who are admitting to coercing men into sex. And I guess the way that it's framed, they were probably like, being honest, because like it's not people reporting on their own victimization, which I think is open to being manipulated by the way you ask questions. But this is people who are openly admitting. But that can also be manipulated by the way you ask questions.
Yeah.
But so maybe take that one with a grain of salt. But I think that because it reminds me of there was that other study they did where they said 1 out of 3 men said that if they thought they could have sex with a girl and get away with it, they would.
Oh, yeah.
You remember that?
That like counted as some statistic.
Yeah, and they made that into a statistic, right? So,
50% of men are rapists.
It was a third. And I remember when I was in college, the woman who said that statistic, she said this at the beginning of the year. There was a whole new class of freshmen, and I was going to an art school, so the majority of students were female. And they would tell the women that statistic. And then the woman turned to all the men and said, so remember, guys, 1/3 of you are willing to do this. And I was just like gobsmacked. I couldn't believe that she would make such a claim. But the whole point of it was to scare the shit out of the girls and make the men paranoid of other men.
Yeah.
So basically the men were ever watchful. This is where white knighting comes from. When you're young, you have like an adult feminist like authority telling you that 1/3 of your friends are likely to, take advantage of a girl and rape her if they thought they'd get away with it. What is that going to do with your relationship with your classmates? And then they tell the women that 1/3 of the men are willing to rape them. What does that do to their opinions of men? So, this is another reason why, by the way, I was suspicious about this study. Not really suspicious, but when they say that they sampled colleges in the New York City area, I was thinking, how many of the girls that are being sampled are feminists, though? And maybe that's why they would self-report as, yeah, I got a man to fucking give up that dick.
Maybe they're Italian feminists.
Yeah, maybe.
It's not sexual assault when you're Italian.
And they're Cuomo-sexuals. Yeah. They're not perverts. They're just Italian.
I'm sorry. I keep making light of this.
No, it's okay.
Sensitive topic.
And last but certainly not least, Anderson and Savage, 2005, is an extensive review of the literature and mentions many studies verifying female heterosexual sexual aggression, providing another fast data source. Additionally, this paper specifically states that women engage in the full range of aggressive sexual actions that men do. The study also found that many aggressive female or sexual female actions technically do not qualify as rape, even if they involve violence and the use of weapons. Well, yeah, water is wet. In 2018, FBI statistics show that 18,487 men were arrested for rape, and 606 women were arrested for rape. How do we reconcile this low female arrest rate for rape with the data in this paper? The obvious answer is men seldom report being sexually victimized. Stempel and Meyer, 2014, referred to the prosecution of such cases as rare and lay part of the blame for this on a lack of concern for male victims. They also state that the dominant sexual archetype is that of the male as offender and the female as victim. Possible reasons given for why situations that run counter to this archetype get little attention include the perception that female sexual victimization of males is rare, that sexual victimization causes males less harm than it does to females, and that males always want sex. Stempel states that data portraying female sexual victimization of males is not palatable as it conflicts with the feminist theory portrayal that men are sexual aggressors or use sexual aggression to oppress women. Another possibility put forth by Stempel is that researchers themselves may have a bias causing them to overlook male sexual victims. Another possible factor is that male rape victims do not fit Christie's notion of the ideal victim. The ideal victim is generally an individual who is part of a group that is historically lacking power, so it's basically like a Marxist definition of the ideal victim. It's funny that they would say that because it is what they think. In our discussion of the sexual assault of men in the United States, men may be viewed as non-ideal victims, since they are, historically, not perceived to be an underserved or underrepresented group of people. As can be seen in the preceding discussion, stereotypes regarding the victims and perpetrators of sexual assaults are not necessarily accurate. Sadly, both men and women are frequently the victims and perpetrators of acts of sexual violence.
That's just stupid. Who cares what happened historically? If somebody's being assaulted, they're being assaulted.
It should be considered stupid, but I can understand that. Remember, the feminists, this is political for them. This isn't really about solving these problems, right? And so that's why they have this idea of, the woke types, they're always bringing in history, and it's always their distorted view, cherry-picked version of history, by the way, that doesn't actually apply to reality because it leaves out what it wants. So because of that, they get to say, well, since women have been historically oppressed, and therefore it's okay if men get raped. I mean, I know it doesn't seem like it makes a lot of sense, but this is the reason why feminists ignore male victims. Now, they've been changing their tune lately about that, but that's only because they know that more and more people are acknowledging the existence of male victims. And so because of it, feminists have to alter their narrative because they want to control the narrative, right? So that's why the toxic masculinity thing has been like going into full gear. Even though it's an older idea, I think that toxic masculinity goes back to like the 90s, and the ideas or like the theories underpinning toxic masculinity go back to the 60s. They just didn't call it toxic masculinity back then. And the purpose of the toxic masculinity narrative is to find a way to blame men for their own problems, so that when you say, well, I care about the male victims of rape, I identify as caring about men, is what they're basically saying. But we have to take into consideration, and then here's all their feminist theories, because that's what, at the end of the day, that's what matters to them, is that they get to continue to perpetrate feminism because feminism is the ultimate grift, and they get to keep making money and getting a tremendous amount of power while also not solving any problems.
I would like to see somebody try to tell a sexual assault victim that it's like
their fault.
Their fault.
Yeah. Well, they won't, but they won't confront a man who was a sexual assault victim. So, by the way, if there are any men watching that are themselves victims of rape or sexual assault, I'm not trying to minimize any of that or make light of it. And in fact, I'd like to hear from you in the comments if you are willing to share your experience. I appreciate it. And let me know what you think about this paper. I actually find it quite interesting. The only issue I have is that I don't think that it's going to get taken on, but it can be a super useful source if you're talking to someone and they're interested in seeing the data. Give them this. I put a link in the description. All right. Stempel and Meyer 2014 debunked the notion that males experience less harm or always want sex, stating that male victims suffer depression, suicidal thoughts, and sexual dysfunction from their sexual assault. Well, yeah, that stereotype that men always want sex, that they're sex hounds, that is in part coming from, I guess you could say, like traditionalism, but I think it's mostly perpetuated by feminism. And of course, feminism is just taking traditionalism and like carrying it all the way through. They're actually more like traditional in some ways with regards to the way that men and women should treat each other. They're more traditional than your average conservative is. I think that if you talk to an average conservative about a man who was a victim of rape, there's probably like at least a 50-50 chance that they're gonna sympathize. But the idea that men are always hungry for sex and therefore, they'll take whatever they can get, even if it's like at the point of a knife or something. I think that's a feminist myth that was put out there, specifically to generalize men. And I think that a lot of people fell for it because they also have like that pre-existing bias. So anyway, according to Masters and Sorrell, 1982, realizing that some sexual assault victims are male and that these male victims suffer after effects very similar to female victims, like I said, depression, suicidal thoughts, and sexual dysfunction. Which, by the way, you'll see that a lot with not just like rapists, like male rapists, because they internalize this idea that violence and force is love because that's their experience, and they can't actually get aroused without, maybe the threat of violence or some other, I guess what I could say, like a fringe thing. And it makes me wonder, honestly, just putting this out there, I think that maybe people who have like really edgy kinks that are really out there, they may also be using that as a means to deal with something they haven't dealt with from their own past. But I'm not an expert on that. So if there's any people who are into the kink thing and you're angry because I've just stereotyped you, I apologize, but that's just something I think might be worth looking into. So, okay. Similar findings were given in Walker et al. 2005, stating that all male rape victims in the study suffered some psychological disturbance caused by the incident. Among the long-term consequences of the rape were self-harming behavior, self-blame, emotional distancing, loss of self-image, feelings of anger, anxiety, and depression. So basically just like female victims. And also it's worth pointing out that men who are falsely accused of rape, and maybe women who are falsely accused, if that happens, they also experience similar symptoms, like these sort of depression and all this. So like being accused does some severe psychological damage. I mean, think about it. Innocent. If you're innocent, yeah, that's what I mean. If you're innocent, falsely accused, right? Because think about it, like most people don't rape. Just the overwhelming majority don't. So those people find the idea of raping someone to be abhorrent. It's an aberration, right? It's absolutely disgusting. So if they're accused of it, I can see how it can have an effect on them. And it makes them feel like garbage. And also, if you're a man and you're accused, and I'm not saying that it's a unique experience, but I'm going to go with it because I am a man and I know men who have been who have had these experiences. If you're a man and you're accused, then there might be a part of you that thinks that you did do that, like that, and it's traumatizing you, right? Like, let's say you slept with a girl. This is what I'm assuming, that you had sex with her, and then later she goes and accuses you of rape. So it causes, because like men, most men, they want consent because they want to be with a sexual partner who wants to be with them. So if you learn later that she didn't consent and she had no interest in you and she thought you were disgusting and that you violated her, I think it's going to actually have like tremendous emotional and psychological damage that comes with it. So it doesn't surprise me, but that was totally like a side note. So okay, among the long-term consequences, like I read already, Stempel et al. Also state that both male and female rapists use weapons 7% of the time, and both male and female victims use a resistance strategy 89% of the time. It needs to be emphasized that Stempel also points out that male sexual arousal is not uncommon during non-consensual sex. A more thorough discussion of this is found in the paper Sexual Arousal and Orgasm in Subjects Who Experience Forced or Non-Consensual Sexual Stimulation, a review by Levin and Van Berlo, 2004, which states, quote, "The review examines whether unsolicited or non-consensual sexual stimulation of either females or males can lead to unwanted sexual arousal or even to orgasm. The conclusion is that such scenarios can occur and that the induction of arousal and orgasm does not indicate that the subjects consented to the stimulation," end quote. Now, obviously, we know that's true. Like, if men get wood, and I think that that's something that some, I won't say that's common, but I will say that some feminists have made the argument that if a man gets hard, he wants it. But it's not common. So I'm not going to, make that a blanket statement. Stempel also pointed out that 8.5% of male rape victims suffered significant injuries. The corresponding figure for women was 12.6%. As it may be that some people have difficulty conceiving how a male can suffer physical injury as a result of being raped by a female, we now present several cases where that was the case. One example of a male rape victim suffering injury is the case of a Romanian cab driver that was reported in the Daily Mail, Riley 2014. The Daily Mail is always putting in these salacious stories of guys getting beat up and raped and shit.
Yeah.
The cab driver was raped at knife point by a woman who stabbed him more than half a dozen times after the fact. Another example from the Daily News reports of an African man who died in the midst of being gang raped by his 6 wives.
What the?
Whoa. Can you get 6 divorces? He's not gonna have shit left. Our last example was reported by 9 News, an Australian TV show. A Russian woman drugged and raped 10 men. She would drug them into unconsciousness for 24 hours, tie a rope around the man's penis to keep him erect, and rape him.
What the fuck?
All of her victims suffered penis trauma from the tied rope and drug poisoning. Did she give him a Viagra? There was also a story of, I think it was in Russia, this burglar was breaking into this woman's business, and she knocked him out and kept him in her basement and raped him every day or something for a while. I don't know if that's I remember that story. Chaplot et al. 2007 finds that much like their female counterparts, what they call benevolent sexism plays a role in minimizing the perceived effects on male rape victims. Benevolent sexism is complimenting women based on stereotypes. Chivalry would be one example. Specifically, they note that stereotypes of males being the dominant sex are correlated with the tendencies for people to downplay the severity of the trauma felt by male rape victims and to exonerate the perpetrators of such violence. Yeah, but that stereotype comes from feminism. It doesn't come from it anywhere else. It's just that most people agree with it. But most people agree with feminism's base assertions. To downplay the trauma experienced by male victims and the painful experiences that may have endured is to show a lack of respect for the dignity of those persons. Not only do male victims have the moral right not to have unwanted sex forced on them due to lack of consent, but they should not be constrained by stereotypes to keep their sufferings bottled up and hidden from others and their own consciousness. I think I just wanted to look at the data. This is a discussion.
Yeah, it's not a study. It's just a paper based on other studies.
Yeah, I know. They're basically just putting everything together. I just think that the discussion... it doesn't take long. I got 15 minutes, so I'll go ahead and read the discussion portion. Please send in super chats if you want to comment at all or say anything. So Defiant Smash says, "Yo, Brian." I don't know who Defiant Smash is, but hello, welcome to the stream. Okay, discussion. We have seen that the type of rape the rape of men occurs with a frequency comparable to the rape of women, and that the arrest rate for female rapists is extremely low. Stereotypes such as "he became erect, so he must have wanted it" have been debunked. Although I don't like, by the way, that they mentioned benevolent sexism. I think that, again, they might be using the language of feminists to beat them at their own game. But personally, I find that disgusting because at the end of the day, you basically validate their language games and they still win. Because they don't really have standards, so I wouldn't call it benevolent sexism. I think the idea of benevolent sexism is retarded on its face, but that's just me, so... It was shown that, contrary to stereotypes, male rape victims suffer the same emotional and psychological consequences as female rape victims, even suffering physical injury at comparable rates. Ethics requires that all crimes of sexual violence be treated as equally serious, regardless of the gender of the victim and perpetrator. We now take a deeper look at some of these ethical issues. The crime of rape is underreported regardless of the gender of the victim. One of the goals of this paper is to bring to light the ethical responsibility that we have to pay more attention and respect to male victims of this serious crime, while continuing to direct resources to the many female victims of sex crimes. All right, whatever.
Don't worry, we're still giving resources to the women.
Yeah, don't worry, we still care about women. How about... All right. In this paper, we have been freely making use of various ethical concepts. We have been using an ethical approach that understands the ethics, how many times are you guys going to say ethics in this, of particular actions in terms of duties and responsibilities to respect the dignity and moral rights of persons. In this ethical approach, persons are believed to be autonomous, and the choices they make with the exercise of their will is to be respected. Also, we should direct resources to the many female victims of sex crimes, which men have to pay for by force, but sure, men are autonomous. Thus, actions in which persons are used or forced to perform actions without their consent and against their will are inherently unethical. Furthermore, since the dignity and moral rights of persons are morally equal in status, this ethical approach requires that persons be treated equally. Taken as a group, this cluster of ethical concepts is at the heart of an ethical theory, sometimes called an ethics of respect for persons, or more technically, a deontological ethic, by Kant, 1785. A deontological ethic is one that does not measure whether an action is ethically right or wrong in terms of its positive or negative consequences, but sees some actions as inherently ethical or inherently unethical, depending on whether the intent of the action is to respect a person's rights, for example, or to use a person as a means and treat them or her as an object, kind of like socialists do. Because of this stance with regard to the use of consequences in discerning the morality of an action, this approach is also known as a non-consequentialist ethic. Yeah, I mentioned that because I watch a lot of like debates with like socialists and leftists and shit, and they don't make deontological ethical statements so much as utilitarian, like, oh, you know, it may be wrong now, but at the end of the day it's going to work out because, you know, the ends justify the means, basically. And so he's basically making an argument against the idea that the ends justify the means, whatever those ends might be, because sometimes the ends are just, well, I'm just a chick that wanted to get laid. And this justifies that. Obviously, it doesn't. From this deontological ethical view, it follows that it is irrelevant if a victim of rape is female or male, for in either case, the rape is unethical. Thus, we hold that a definition of rape should be gender neutral. Deontological ethics is widely used in applied ethics, ranging from biomedical ethics to business ethics. That's Bowie, VTAC, and Korsgaard. Korsgaard, is that how you say it? Korsgaard is a proponent of a Kantian deontological ethics who has recently applied deontological ethics to the issue of the moral status of non-human animals.
Man, I'm glad that you're reading this.
Because of these words?
Yeah.
You know what? Fortunately, I've been watching a lot of James Lindsay, and so he's
talking about the moral ethics of non-human animals.
Yeah. Well, he's basically using Korsgaard as a proponent of Kantian deontological ethics because he used it to apply to animals. So what he's saying is, if we're applying this to animals, we should apply this to men, right? Like, if we're okay with applying this to animals, then we should apply this to men. Although our approach has a deontological ethical orientation, we acknowledge that similar conclusions can be drawn with a consequentialist ethic, such as utilitarian ethics. A utilitarian ethic assesses the morality of an action by looking at the action's consequences, whether they are overall positive or negative. The serious negative consequences experienced by rape victims would, to a consequentialist, show the unethical nature of the action. Not always, though. That's the problem with utilitarian ethics. They're not really ethics. So, I'm sorry, and not in my opinion. Like, if you're not willing to do things the right way, I think the methodology matters more than the outcome. because the outcome is not guaranteed.
I don't know if I want to get into this philosophical stuff.
All right. Well, we're going to move on anyway. That's just my opinion. So, taken as a whole, it should be clear that crimes of sexual violence should be taken equally seriously, regardless of the gender of the perpetrator and victim. Yeah, obviously. All right. This is the end. To conclude, researchers such as Masters and Searle and Walker, Archer, and Davies have documented the suffering that male victims of rape experience. Attention must also be paid to how rape and other sexual acts are defined. We see some evidence of the concept of rape being thought of in more gender-neutral terms than it used to be, but it seems that more efforts are needed. Many ethical concepts and principles seem to us to be gender-neutral. For example, rights, dignity, consent, suffering, trust, etc. Not only is it possible to think of the concept of rape in gender-neutral terms, but it will likely be beneficial to male victims to do so, as Stempel and Meyer point out. We do not accept the notion that paying attention to one group of victims takes away from any other group of victims.
Here we go again.
To us, this is not a zero-sum game. Helping victims is helping victims, no matter the group identities involved. Yeah.
Not to some people.
We assert that the more victims who can be helped, the greater will be the added utility to society. Yeah, again, you don't, like, the thing is, I think that this is a common thing that I see. Sometimes it's just people covering their own ass. But I think sometimes it's like treating feminists in good faith under the hope that they will understand. And like, you've come in and you've got like, you know, you I don't know, it's like you've come in.
This radical concept, guys. Why don't we treat male victims of rape like, well?
Are you saying that, you know, and of course feminists make everything about how women are harmed more. Because they don't actually care about solving the problem. So there's like literally no need for all this. It's not a zero-sum game, guys. But I get that this is, you're coming at this from the a very, very unpopular position.
The depths of the feminist vagina.
Yeah, it's the most unpopular position is the feminist vagina. It's from there. But like,
probably shouldn't be talking about vaginas.
No, well. Certainly not feminist ones, but anyway. So yeah, I mean, I get all that. It seems like they're basically just, like I said, they're just making sure that they're crossing their T's and dotting their lowercase J's. But it gets so old to be like, oh, we're not sexist. We just think men should be included. Like, stop doing that, because I think that it basically tells them that there is that weakness that they can plug away at. Like, acknowledging that there are issues that men face is simply acknowledging reality and the truth.
I think they're just trying to get ahead of the ball.
Yeah, because they're going to be accused.
But even if they get ahead of the ball, they probably still are accused of not caring about women enough.
Of course. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what they're going to do, because they, like, that's like I said. How dare
you say that men are raping
this has nothing. Women. Yeah, like basically what's going on here is there are two things that look like they're fighting for the same thing, but they're not.
Right.
These guys basically want, because it is guys. These guys, they're looking to like open up the conversation around, you know, victims of rape, sexual assault, etc. They want to include men. They've done all their homework. They have their studies. They've looked at the definitions. They've taken all of that into account, and they've been extremely charitable to the point where it's actually kind of annoying, but I get it. It's okay. It's what you got to do, right? Makes sense. But the people they're up against that are going to oppose them, they're not the kind of people that care about the truth. They're only interested in preserving their narrative. And so, like, covering your ass, like, you know, 6 ways from Sunday, it has its benefits, but you don't need to constantly...
I don't know if it does.
No, I mean, like, in terms of, like, all of the homework they've done on the actual studies that show the results. But I'm not talking about them saying, we actually know that women suffer from these things too, and that their voices matter, and, like, you know, hashtag Me Too, it started off with, well, good intentions. Like, that's exactly the same kind of shit that those people would say, right? Where they'd say, well, Me Too started off good. It's like, no, it was never good. It was always garbage. It was always trying to eliminate due process. I don't care what you think about Harvey Weinstein. He deserved due process. That's not how any of this shit works. And they'll they're just pay lip service to feminists. People who literally don't care about the truth. And it's not because they're ignorant. It's because they're dishonest. They know that they're full of shit. They know that everything they say is full of shit, but it's about power. It's not about, like, the truth. The truth destroys their power. That's why they're going to oppose these people, because if these guys and their studies, which there is a lot of good stuff here, you know, that I didn't even know, if it comes to light in a serious way and people start taking it really seriously, then what happens to the feminist orthodoxy is that their narrative about how rape and sexual assault are gendered and only feminists can solve it because it's a women's issue, that is gone. That gets blown out of the water. It's completely destroyed. And so what feminists will have to do is they'll have to regroup and figure out a new thing to latch onto, which will probably just be male victims. Oh, we care about male victims too. And then they'll just drag them into their under their wing and then start using the toxic masculinity narrative. Or they can't be the experts on this. They can't be the people that discuss rape and sexual assault because it's no longer just about women, and they've been doing a disservice to men who are victims for decades, you know, along with the government and, you know, all these other, so it's not just feminists, but yeah, like their whole thing is, it's basically all about preserving the narrative because that's where their power and resources comes from. Mm-hmm. And this blows it right out of the water. Yeah. So the only thing that they can do is either oppose it, which is what they're going to do at first, and if it doesn't work out, then they're going to basically say, oh, well, actually, suddenly we all care about men too, and they'll just like roll out men of color, gay men, trans men, because they don't actually care about men. So, and then they'll say that they care about them, and then they'll bring up toxic masculinity. So they already have like tactics in place, but it's got nothing to do with the facts. All right, so I got some super chats. Josh Chasen gives us $10 and says, my mother, I was assaulted only once, would look me up and down at the drop of a hat in a way that was channeling Jesse LP, said Jesse Lee Peterson, that he was speaking to when he says mothers sexualize their kids, even though I'm fugly. Thank you, Josh, and I'm sorry that happened to you. That was 2 super chats, one for $10 and one for $2. Yeah, Jesse Lee Peterson has said that. He said that mothers are horny for their sons.
Ew.
I don't know if I buy that, but I think that there is like something with mothers, and I don't know if this is also, it could be true of fathers too in some cases, but there is something with mothers that don't want their children, especially if they have sons, to like leave them, and so they want to keep them around. You know, I think that is an issue, and it might be a big issue with single moms, but I'm not really sure. So yeah, Jesse Lee Peterson has said that mothers are horny for their sons. I don't know if that's true, but you guys can tell me what you think about that in the comments. And I'm sorry that happened to you, Josh. I am sorry. Okay, so we're going to, I think, wrap it up. Do you have any final thoughts on this? Do you feel like this was a good use of your time?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was better than I thought it was going to be. I was a little worried, but because Karen sent it to me, I was like, this has to be good. So I want to know what you guys think about this study, or this paper. It's not really a study. It's basically like a paper that makes an argument and uses a bunch of studies to make it.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I'd be interested in looking at the studies more carefully.
Yeah.
Like if it's all based on surveys and stuff like that.
Yeah, I find that surveys are a little like, because sometimes they're self-reporting, and like it comes down to what the person is saying and what the listener, how they interpret it. Right. Because that's what the Mary Koss thing did.
I really don't have any problem believing that men are raped at the same level as women.
Yeah.
I don't have any problem.
One thing I do wonder about, and I know none of this came up, but I wonder if lesbian women rate at higher rates than straight women, or even maybe gay men. I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know. It's just something I'm thinking about, because like ever since I learned about the domestic violence gap, I guess, between like where the rate of domestic violence among lesbians is the highest and the rate of domestic violence among gay men is the lowest, I wonder like if that also extends to other things. So Maybe one day we'll find out. It's one of those things, like sometimes people don't know the answer to a question because the question hasn't been asked amongst those who would be likely to pursue the answer. So I would like to know. If you guys have any insight to any of that, let us know. I'm going to go ahead and take us out, though. Thank you guys so much for coming and hanging out and looking at this study with Lindsay and myself. If you guys don't mind, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. And also, again, if you've had any adverse experiences of man, did you try to report it to the police? Did you try to report it to anyone? How did that go? I'm curious. So if you're willing to share only, let me know in the comments. All right, and also our fundraiser is going on. Once again, you can go to feedthebachelor.com and check it out. We might be doing a fundraising stream tomorrow. I'm not 100% certain, but like I said, if that doesn't happen, I'll see you guys the week after next. If you guys like this video, please smash like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, hit the bell for notifications, leave us a comment, and share this video. Thank you guys so much for coming on today's show, and we'll talk to you later.
Peace out.
Cox can help make your home smarter and your life easier. Now you can use your Contour voice remote to connect to your home life cameras so you can view them right on your TV screen using simple voice commands. That makes it easy to keep tabs on what's happening around your home right from your couch. Need to keep an eye on the kids when they're playing outside? Just say, "Show me my backyard camera" into your Cox voice remote and watch them while you're in the house. And if you're waiting for a delivery and want to make sure it's there on time, no problem. Just say, "Show me driveway camera" to check on it with your Home Life HD cameras on the TV screen while you go about your day. When you live in a home powered by Cox Internet, you can stay connected to what matters and let Cox take care of the rest. To learn more about all the benefits of your connected home, visit cox.com/thisishome today.
VaxStats. It's time for VaxStats. If you're young and healthy, you are more likely to crash your car than have a serious side effect of the COVID-19 vaccine. So get vaxxed, y'all. Visit vaccinate.virginia.gov.